us every time.
IVS, we are now starting.
Buongiorno, benvenuti.
Good afternoon,
Direi che possiamo
everyone.
cominciare. Accomodatevi.
I would kindly ask everyone to take a seat. But thank you so much for being so numerous today. And many people are attending remotely connected, so we're very much happy with attendance. Luca Pandolfi, Project Manager IVS. I do organize and coordinate the organization of this summit on behalf of Confindustria. Along with Val Campus, we did start this venture some 10 years ago. We're celebrating 1 decade of collaboration with our partners in this venture, again, which has grown over the years. We did start with 150 exhibitors and some 3,000 visitors. We did reach out to 200 with over 12,000 people visiting from many different countries. So we are glad to say that we just want to carry on this growth. Objectives for IVS 2024, 5th edition, no doubt are objectives which are growth related. And not so much growth from a size standpoint or associated to the number of events, which no doubt there will be many. But we want to grow in quality of a technical content. Mr. Apuzzo will tell us more about the project for IVS 2024. We want to increase and improve the standing of participants, of speakers, and we have a very beautiful example today of a short meeting that used to be, let's say, not so much in depth as it has become, as we're now very much focusing on a number of things. So we're going to hear from Roland Berger, Octagona. So we're going to hear about the market objectives. So as far as IVS, we want to grow. We want to become an international exhibition. We are part of the international exhibition calendar. We do have visitors coming from over 60 countries, but I'm sure that we might still be perceived as a kind of a local/European meeting. We want to overcome this paradigm and become more international. How do we do that? Well, we have to increase in visibility, first of all, and you will see that our machine is not stopping anymore. We do regularly share projects, content, activities, so that we do not skip or miss valuable communication. Speaking through visibility, I'd love to mention international alliances. We do have some strategic partners with UK, Spain, and we're currently undertaking some new partnerships with technical associations, the European Sealing Association as an example. And I'm thinking about a number of different examples. You can check that on our website. Many important partnerships that allows us to detect the technical gaps on the market to better understand what are the information that our companies need to be able to operate. Very rapidly, We're also increasing the number of media partnerships. They're almost doubled with respect to our prior edition. And we do publish on international magazines, which are very much influential, so that we can let our voice be heard all over the world. We're going to work on specific market. We're having a focus on Middle East, and also we're investing in knowledge. Well, if you take the scientific content of our conferences, do really stand out as a big investment in knowledge. But I don't want to anticipate what Mr. Rapuzzo will say. I can only anticipate efforts have been many to increase and improve, and you will hear about a broadening of the program also from a duration standpoint. Back to knowledge, we need to detect what are the key themes, the key topics, and this is why Val Campus is also working on a number of technical aspects. We met API recently to talk about standards involved in the United States. So we try to become richer and richer in content. We invest in knowledge, and we do also invest in experience. We want the exhibition really to become something that goes well beyond the 2 days of a pure exhibition, but we wish it can become a whole week totally related to events for valves. It used to be 2 days, it has become 2.5 days program. 2022, over 800 people attending a gala dinner, and we're going to have some 1,000 next year. We're very positively surprised by the request for participation from the audience, and we're now working to adapt all of, let's say, this big need to fully respond to the request from people to coming. So we're also working and trying to improve let's say, the driveways and to improve the flows around the pavilion. Possibly we're going to have a third pavilion, which is going to be same quality and same size as the two traditional pavilions we have relied on so far. We're also organizing some collateral events. There will be a golf contest. We are now considering some partnerships with cultural institutes, and we will be using the airport to promote the exhibition as well as the other way around. You know that we have overcome 40 million passengers this year in Bergamo, and people can fly from 143 destinations. They can fly to Bergamo, something that we could not even dream about not even a decade ago. 2 daily flights, 7 days out of 7 to United Emirates, and we can boost a number of connections through Dubai. You can actually travel in many different destinations in the world, and many of these destinations are our destinations for valves. And think about the access from Middle East. You were to travel from Malpensa, whereas now from Emirates you can fly directly to Bergamo. Not to mention Europe. Paris and London would allow visitors to come in a day. They can literally come in the morning, see the exhibition, and go back at night. So we're going to be able to receive passengers, visitors. We're going to have an agreement for private flights. And also, we will organize shuttle bus so that, let's say, connections from airport to exhibition will be easier. Also, we're trying to ensure some additional services in terms of, for instance, private shuttles which will connect and which will drive passengers from their hotel to the exhibition and back. Golf contest, I've mentioned, it started off as a very small contest. Now it's been highly requested, and perhaps we will have to leave somebody out. Unfortunately, we do have a let's say, space constraint, and we will not be able to let everyone, let's say, join in the golf contest. Back to valves. This is what we're talking about. So through Italian companies, European companies, we are now promoting active participation of IVS. So not only we're inviting you so that you can exhibit your product in IVS, but we also support you in increase your visibility so that you can best organize collateral events. Think about the tens of thousands of visitors that we've organized over the years. Tens of thousands of people have come to the exhibitions, and they were then able to go and see the manufacturing sites, and then they were driven back to the exhibition site. So you can imagine how precious this can be, how effective this can be, rather than just showing product on exhibit. And this is because we can really showcase tradition, products, quality. And let me deep down to the Italian district. IVS is an international exhibition, but we're in Italy, and this is where we started from. We are working together with manufacturers associations and along with campus, Campus, so that we can create and kind of develop a movement. Sizes matter, of course, and an increasingly competitive world is asking us to go through merger acquisitions so that we can grow. So SMEs, of course, are growing in size, and this is applicable to oil and gas and other industries where our valves can be used. This will surely mean that there will be some new growth dynamics, and meetings like today will allow us to have a better vision on the outlook. And Sisi Bellomo will tell us about commodities, what are the signals now for perhaps a price volatility, so a world that is becoming more difficult to rule and master, but I'm sure there will be some positive signals as well. I'm thinking about long-term outlook, demand for gas, which is growing up until 2040, new technology, new application. And I'll stop here and I will leave the floor to the next speakers. Thank you so much. We're happy to welcome comments, pieces of advice, and we look forward to seeing you all May 2024 in Bergamo, both for conferences as well as to exhibit. So thank you all. Have a productive meeting today and have a productive exhibition back in 2024. I leave the floor to Francesco Apuzzo, who's going to tell us about Valve Campus project for 2024, and right after, Sisi Bellomo will moderate the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
Grazie Luca.
Thank you, Luca. Welcome, everyone. I will show you the program of conferences for the next edition of IVS 2024.
Ci siamo chiesti come
So, at the very beginning, we did ask ourselves, how could we develop and come up with a new offering for this upcoming exhibitions? And there were two guidelines that we wanted to stick to. One was educating from a technical standpoint and providing knowledge. And on the basis of these two kind of guidelines, objectives, we have started to develop our programming and offering. So the first thing that we were wondering about and we have asked about is to have more time available as well as more space available so that we can best express the potentiality of our conferences. And we've negotiated with the Fiera, and thank you, Luca, for being with us tonight. So we have the possibility to have a Tuesday afternoon, which will be fully devoted to conferences. It is a great quality leap forward because we will have the possibility to have more people on board, and around the venue there will be many people going around, and it was perfect. We thought it was perfect for us to have a Tuesday afternoon available so that we could upgrade the program of conferences, so that we could enjoy more and better. Because there's always been, it's always been it's always been observed that there was a time constraint, and unfortunately, it was not always easy to attend the conference. So this is the very first piece of news. So conferences will start on Tuesday afternoon at 2:30.
Abbiamo poi pensato che era necessario avere
And then we thought it would be necessary to have more representatives. For this reason, our scientific committee has been expanded, and it is now including 26 members. The reason is, well, we wanted to have more representatives, which means to gather many different voices that could help us in preparing the exhibition per se, but also because we thought that all of these members could really deliver their precious contribution to a more in-depth relationship, and so that better content can be presented. So scientific committee is not just asked to actually go through and review the materials that have been submitted to them, but it's being an active stakeholder, so that more relevant contents could be detected and therefore explored. We have tried to be proactive in the construction of content. What do I mean by that? Well, we have kind of given up the traditional scheme, which means a full list of contents, and then I will launch a call for paper. I will receive from authors their interest to participate, and therefore my content is all around this, so presenting what I have collected. So we were wondering, why can't we create our content ourselves, or why couldn't we try to detect the new trends or some new themes to further explore, and perhaps look for the institution or association that would help us in delivering all of these contents. We have therefore moved on to a self-production of content, and Valve Campus has then been, let's say, the author of a number of content, which I'm going to present, and they're going to be finally taken advantage of during the exhibition. Next slide, it says interaction with the authors. Well, this is going to be the 5th edition. We do now have a database of potential authors who have been contacted, so that we could understand what kind of technical content could deliver. At the same time, when talking to them, we were trying to provide some kind of orientation so that they could deliver content that would be interesting to our audience. The program will therefore break down as follows: 3 pillars: roundtables, Valve Campus Academy projects, and papers and authors. We're going to hold 4 roundtables, 5 projects, 40 papers. Roundtable for Tuesday afternoon is going to tackle the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and the sustainability report that many of our companies will be asked to provide within the first quarter of 26. It is quite a hot topic, I have to say, and let's say that around the table, it won't be just an admin-based discussion, but we will try to understand whether the sustainability report can actually become a competitive advantage for companies who will file it. So the bottom line is, how do we make a sustainability journey more added value for all of those companies who will undertake it? The second theme, which is also quite important and I believe interesting for entrepreneurs, is the impact of energy transition and decarbonization on the valve equipment supply chain. This is key also, and this is something that Cesar Balomo will further expand upon, as well as by Leonardo Bonetti. He will talk about the market trends. It is inevitable that this transition will ask our companies to rephrase their sales offering, their strategies, to review their competitive positioning. So no doubt this is a topic that is going to be profoundly debated over the next few years, and we wanted to leave some room to it.
Roundtable number 3 is a more technical roundtable, and in fact is going to delve on the additive manufacturing as far as the valve supply chain is concerned. It's now the 10th year that this new technology has been introduced into our world, and we want to explore whether the regulations and opportunities can be further expanded. The fourth and last roundtable concerns hydrogen. And in this case, as well, our vision will be that of offering technical and also outlook content as far as this market sector is concerned. Mr. Bonetti, in fact, later on will have a chapter of his talk that will delve on renewable sources and the type of production that is closer to our production, so valves and components. Because the other renewables, so sun power and wind power, are farther away from our main core businesses. Let's now focus on the projects that have been supported by the Val Campus Academy. The first sponsored project that will be presented at the exhibition is the creation of a mathematical model fit or suitable to calculate the GHG greenhouse gases of the Scope 3 section. It's a very important aspect because it will focus on the business carbon footprint. As you know, all emissions fall under 3 groups, Scope 1, 2, and 3. And Scope 3 is the one which is more difficult to calculate. So as an association, we decided to work on an algorithm that was specific for the valve supply chain, so as to allow our members to respect the Scope 3 GHG standards in a common line and a simpler manner. And Mr. Giorgini will focus on that. He is responsible of strategies and tools for sustainability reporting. Moreover, we also fostered another project that focuses on market trend information. Mr. Bonetti will focus on that, and he will give us an outlook in a 5 to 10 and even further ahead time frame concerning challenges and opportunities. So the outlook for the coming years, analyzing the context and trends of our sector. I've already had a preview of his work, and I'm sure that all of the members and associates will consider his work truly fruitful and helpful. Now, another activity was a focus on mechanical behavior of the polymeric seals at LH2 conditions. These had to be assessed at the same temperature of liquid hydrogen. So what did we do? We set up a partnership with 3 manufacturers. Each one sent their samples of different polymers. We sent them to the Aerospace Advanced Composite Materials, an Austrian laboratory that will give us a resulting analysis for the temperatures of minus 253 degrees, so compression and elastic performance of the polymers. And this is something that is highly technical and specific. It will be presented at the exhibition and then will also be published on our sector magazines and reviews. Another project, the master sealing training. Valve Campus has focused on 2 high-level special sessions focusing on selecting lip seals, elastomers, polymers in specific industrial applications, both in cryogenics, both in other more specific applications that focus on hydrogen, for example, or RHUS. And then, last but not least, this is one of the most important sessions that we will present next exhibition. We have supported a project on AI applications for the valve supply chain. I believe you're all informed on what is occurring in the IT sector. There are plenty of opportunities offered by AI. And this in different stages of our processing, so starting from pre-sale, preparing quotes, reporting and BOM in technical plans or products and projects for manufacturing, and the preparation of specs and documents that will speed up in a very precise manner the whole process so that the company know-how can be very well structured in a digital expert repository or body that encloses and embraces all of our work and will make all of our work available in terms of the know-how that has been achieved during the whole life of the companies. We will have 3 experts who will speak about these topics. We're still talking to the experts. One has confirmed participation. He's coming from Houston. And then there's a European expert and an expert from the US, Houston. They will illustrate the concept of this type of application solutions so as to involve and inform the audience. And this is, of course, driven to entrepreneurs so as to allow them to understand the great opportunities that these tools allow. As Valve Campus, we are studying the feasibility of synergic supply chain projects in this sector. It's not easy at all. and it's not cheap at all. It has intrinsic difficulties, but nonetheless, this is something that we will have to tackle or face in the next 5 years. So this is more or less the presentation of what will occur in the next exhibition. I truly hope that the audience will consider it interesting. As I said initially, we've completely changed the paradigm because we decided to become content creators. So this is a shift in our type of work. And so I believe that from here to the following years, the contribution of authors will really be focused on sharing content that is absolutely important for us and our members. This will allow us also to have a strategic change. We will become more and more international because if we become creators of content, we can also export the content itself. So thank you for your attention, and now let me leave the floor to Sissi Bellomo. Thank you. I will try to avoid all this time that has been allotted to me, but there is in fact a lot I have to focus on. Probably you met me in the past. I work for Sole 24 Ore, the newspaper, and focus on energy and chemicals. Listening to engineer Apuzzo, really, he's a barometer, he's an expert. I give him some tips in terms of complexity, but he is really highly knowledgeable. And now I would like to also give you an outlook in terms of opportunities. Now, the present situation for oil and gas is truly particular, and for energy is truly particular for in this period. Of course, we have artificial intelligence. It will have to be embraced in our organizations so we work on hydrogen, clean gases, alternative energy sources. You are much more informed than I am. I'm not a technician, I'm just an observer, and I look keenly at what occurs around me. So as a journalist, let me start from what I have been recently reading. I was ironically smiling this morning when the International Energy Agency claimed Mr. Birol said, "It is the moment of truth. Oil and gas companies should devote half of their investment to clean energies." When I hear these things, well, you know, I have, how can I describe my feelings? It's like asking a pizzeria to start selling balls. Anyhow, it's true. Irony will come up quite easily in your minds, but it is true. We have to be committed to ask oil and gas companies to be as more and more sustainable as possible, and also because there are constraints that will be mandatory. The request for fossil fuels does not look as it's dropping. Maybe we will reach a plateau in the coming years, and most analysts agree on this aspect. But plateau does not mean that by tomorrow we will have solar energy or wind energy supporting us. We will have investment opportunities that we'll need to seize, and think of your sectors, for example. You will have to seize these opportunities, and you will need to navigate the complexities. This year, investment in gas has skyrocketed and accelerated the market. Let me just give you some figures. There has been an awakening in investment, even if we're not back to the 900 billion per year that were the standard in 2014, when too much was probably spent in this sector. It comes clearly to the surface that we can achieve according to IE 528 billion. So this is a phenomenon that is underlined by many analysts. In fact, probably there is a very, very close and strong link with the geopolitical events that we have around us and that have been clashing with our household expenses. The situation in Ukraine, we had the sensation that we had to be very, very quick in investing in energy security. We had to combine diversification of sources of energy in different ways. So investment in renewables and investment in oil and gas have grown, and even the public opinion is more aware of how important these matters are. We are observing many people rethinking the optimism on green transition. It will not probably be achieved very rapidly without impacting economic sustainability, because let's not forget that it has to be a fair transition, and therefore it should also be fair from the economic point of view, the social point of view. It should not be the transition of the wealthy that can buy a Tesla, whilst the others have to, try and scratch their heads and see how they can do without buying a new car. However, bottom line, more is being invested. Istat shows a surplus of $100 billion vis-à-vis what occurred in the past 2 years. So the forecast before the Ukraine war has doubled, and the supply chain had to chase these figures to be able to meet the requirements. The FID has received plenty of investment, and there's also another awakening. Some geographies that are close to us, which is probably easier to work with, like Norway, that will this year have record investments. They are investing very, very much in Norway. They are considered a super green country with plenty of electric cars, investing in the environment, environmental friendly solutions, and they are investing on oil and gas with a low carbon footprint. Maybe this is a new direction to look into. They have started and opened an oil field, by the way, where the engines are generated by electricity coming from a wind farm. So, again, in the North Sea, the UK. There have been new licenses handed out, new investment increasing in the offshore, which is a sector where the increase has really been incredible in Europe, but also in other areas. For example, Middle East, Saudi Arabia has many, many projects, 55 billion in capex from Saudi Aramco. Meetings with the contractors, meetings with the suppliers. Saudi Arabia is truly very active in developing their oil fields and gas fields with the purpose of using the gas in their country and exporting oil. So oil exports are still required and in high demand. And then Qatar, they have invested in important expansion in gas, in liquefied natural gas. And that is something which is truly important and remarkable. The United Arab Emirates, Brazil, probably it's a little bit more risky given the ups and downs in their investment trends, but there are 23 billion capex investment, Guyana, the new frontiers of oil, the US, where the request has gone beyond expectations for the interest of shale oil. And as a journalist, allow me to refer back to the news of the latest titles. OPEC Plus, which is embarrassed in terms of how to manage the situation, because yes, the oil demand is growing, but the supply of non-OPEC countries with the engine of the US is growing so much that will compensate production cuts decided by OPEC.
They are now having discussions in terms of how sharing quotas, and it looks like Nigeria, Angola, which cannot actually make it to the quota that they're supposed to, and they're now having big discussions around this. But no doubt that there is a growing, let's say, growing problems from United Arab countries, which are now suffering from the cuts, from the big reductions. And maybe this is not a mainstream opinion, but I believe that we might even come to a war of prices. And Russia, despite the sanctions, they keep producing more and more. And maybe they will be the harsh one, and they will let the oil price to collapse. It might be a scenario. Well, the oil price is heavily influenced these days by topics which are not the traditional one for the industry. It depends on the policies of the central banks. It depends upon the dollar exchange to foreign currency. And also the perception that market operators, traders, although I don't like to point the finger to speculation as the first engine of price movement, but the overall perception of the worldwide economy, which again is heavily influenced by the central banks. But if we take a look at oil and gas industry, it looks like it is in deep state of health, and offshore and deep offshore is now seeing projects in a very long run. It is not a short cycle investment. I just put some money and I just grab the profits right away. These are investment profile which are, to me, clearly saying that there is a growing recovery of trust in this very industry, and these are encouraging indications because there is a willingness to invest over the next few years. But we have to do it perhaps a bit differently with respect to the past. And we have to pay attention to decarbonization. Offshore, by the way, might have attracted more investment, although environmentalists are not so much clear about this, that it looks like it is less carbon intensive with respect to other offshore production. Well, it is perhaps better controlled in terms of emissions. It can be controlled, it can be managed a bit better. And maybe this other aspect is delivering great advantage. So, good news for the sector. I have to say, good news for the industry, although there are some hard challenges yet to cope with. Biggest challenges are those coming from the geopolitical scenario. Geopolitical scenario, it is now actually pushing towards the use of fossil fuels, at least in the medium term. And the energy crisis has led to rethinking of energy transition, or at least the times for energy transition. There is some technology neutral openness now that we are observing. So there's no clear-cut condemnation versus the oil refinement, the traditional oil refinement, but maybe how about some adaptation to produce e-fuel or biofuel, or at least a system which is very similar to what was there before, and it still be used by valve manufacturers or component manufacturers with no big difference with what they used to do in the past. Now, the ambition of having everything hydrogen ready, well, implies big challenges from engineering, innovation, and so on. And it also implies that perhaps finally the legislation, the regulatory framework and standards and regulation framework is coming to kind of completion also when it comes to the incentive piece, because it is still quite vague. Things may still change. We have seen we've seen countries stepping back. If you consider Germany, there were heat pumps everywhere. And then they realized that it would have been too expensive despite incentives. People wouldn't like it. They could not accept it. And also they've observed that they were not installers, so they were not plumbers, not enough plumbers, so that they could accelerate on heat pumps. And then they had a rethinking about that. And then another rethinking from the European Commission side on green fuel-fed engines and not actually giving in to the electric vehicles. And the plans for energy transitions have slowed down. They have become more realistic in a nutshell. And things might still change. Election will be there in Europe as well as in the United States. And it looks like Trump is now saying that it doesn't quite like what's going on the energy transition, and he wants to re-incentivize the fossil fuels, which has literally skyrocketed during Biden government. So this is more painful topics, if you will. Well, Russia, no doubt, and is perhaps being excluded from this scenario, and no bargainings in Russia, as it should be the case, because it should be sanctioned, and actually sanctions are not proving to be super effective, unfortunately. And we don't know how long Russia will be kind of ruled out. And also another area, which was the Eastern Mediterranean area, unfortunately, is not being included anymore because of the war in Israel. And Israel itself was heavily investing for further development of their oil mining activities or fields, and there were expectation for 3 billion capex for the next 3 years. I would expect now a slowdown, and unfortunately a slowdown will have a repercussion and probably entail other fall downs. Well, in October, when the war actually outburst, they were still providing 12 licensing for new exploration, and this is Israel, Lebanon, Gaza, where it looked like Gaza Marine would have been, let's say, executed soon. So I see no short-term opportunities, unfortunately. And this brings along a potential sunset for the East Med, the gas duct, the pipeline that should have connected the Eastern Mediterranean countries up until Greece and Italy. And that would have meant also the exploration of resources in Cyprus. Will there ever be a new interest for Cyprus? You know, people were considering whether or not shall we liquefy it elsewhere, shall we make an LNG installation here, and then we do reconnect to the pipe. Does the pipe go through Cyprus, yes or no? And Cyprus is stuck right now. And now, other than the geopolitical scenario from a war standpoint, some additional complications are coming from a growing trend which have to do with local content. According to OECD, from crisis of 2008, over 240 localization measures have been introduced. And this is not only oil and gas, but oil and gas has been heavily included. Measures are now aiming at green resources, green technologies, and Europe is now discussing the Net Zero Industry Act, which might have some good repercussions. And the position of the European Parliament is now expanding the scope to all of the components, sustainable fuels. So if the spectrum is being broadened, there might be some good repercussion. And there is a whole series of commercial barriers other than the local content. From 2019, the European Monetary Fund to date, sales barriers in the world are multiplied times 3. So there are over 3,000 custom duties and so on. So there's a growing trend to fragmentation, deglobalization, and these are, of course, economist talks, but thank goodness the world is still fairly good connected and we can still work despite borders. But yes, indeed, the world is going towards a fragmentation. There's a strong pressure from United States to detach themselves from China, something that in Europe has been interpreted as a de-risking rather than a decoupling, but less trade is there and less complications when you want to trade with a certain country. And so it is still something that we have to manage. And also, you cannot just, let's say, stay in your local courtyard, you know, although we try perhaps to further maximize what is existing in Italy, but we cannot just rely on what we have in Italy. And new obligations upcoming and new rules to stick to. And the next challenge, which might be a very good opportunity for your industry, the one that has been mentioned by Apuzzo as well, is measures to contain the fugitive emissions, methane emissions. That is very promising as a field to me, because there's a strong trend not only in Europe but also in the United States as well as China. The United States and China have agreed to bring to COP28 a strong pressure to contain greenhouse gases, which account for 1/3 of the global warming. So there's obsession for CO2, but actually the fugitive methane emissions, if we were able to contain it, we were actually able to beat down the global warming more effectively. Soon, the United States is going to pass 6 new important measures. European Union is now considering to measure emissions from 27 and impose sanctions for those who are not controlling the emissions within the EU, as well as on products they import within 2030. The intention in Europe is to do things in a very stiff manner, but we will see whether we will have then a component which allow to contain fugitive methane emissions and therefore greater business opportunities. It is now 5:10, and because I wanted to contain myself in my speech, I may perhaps stop here. I was perhaps a bit chaotic in the delivery of content, but more or less I've told you everything that I wanted to say about. Thank you so much.
Adesso dopo di me lascio la...
I will now leave the floor to the more rational and structured presentation from Leonardo Bonetti, Roland Berger, who will tell you in a more systematic and scientific manner things which I have shared in a more of a visionary way. And then we'll break for coffee right after that.
Grazie Sissi, grazie a tutti.
Thank you, Sissi. Thank you, everyone. Let me introduce myself. My name is Leonardo Bonetti from Roland Berger. For those of you who don't know us, we do provide strategic consultancy next to top management of companies, international companies, when it comes to these topics. We will be sharing today some hint on your reference market. And more specifically, we're going to look at perspectives on core oil and gas markets. We're then going to have a look at the, let's say, a second chapter, which is the outlook on growing markets. And then we will spend some time on the possible implications on the market as well as on the players within the market itself. Last but not least, we'll go through some priorities which we'll see coming ahead. Well, first of all, I'd love to start from the core market. To start with, prices, price volatility, starting from 19 to 23, you can appreciate there has been quite a significant volatility on oil as well as on gas. Sissi explained very well what's going on, and of course this current scenario brings uncertainty on prices and therefore volatility. But if we take a look at investment overall, you can clearly appreciate that starting from 2020 there has been a significant growth in investment. In 2022, investment level was reaching out, well, we're very close to 2019 investment. So on top of 21, 20 and 21, you do also see some outlook for 23. So there's clearly a progression, 21, 22, 23, Saudi Aramco, up to 50 billion investment, and other players are still progressing quite good, even for 2023. And this is kind of opening up for oil and gas. And let's take a look at what is the development of investment by region. Clearly, there's 2020 in between, and 19 and 22 are the other 2 years that we look at, and 22 is very close to the results of 29. As far as the outlook for next few years, contained growth, 2% for the market. What is important to emphasize, though, is the development of the mix from a geography standpoint. In this context, of course, Middle East is reporting the greatest, the most relevant growth, but it is also relevant from the growth efforts, what is happening in North America. If we take a look at the value chain upstream, and if you take a look at what happens on the left-hand side, onshore, offshore investments in these two sectors, you can clearly see a substantial difference between the two segments. Onshore has reported minus 4% yearly between 2019 and 24, whereas offshore has very well recovered with respect to historical values. And 2022, as well as 23-24, expectation is to go equal as the same values as 19. On the right-hand side, you can appreciate that investments are mainly focused in the offshore in Middle East, but some additional geographies are becoming relevant. North America, South America, they're still holding, and also Europe is still holding quite a significant share. And if we still follow the value chain, FPSO is a market that today is quite stable. You can see it on the left-hand side. Well, it is kind of swinging around 200. Orders, they're still volatile, and that is a kind of a natural volatility within the sector. And after 2020, there has been strong recovery, and the forecasts are now expecting a deployment which is 4-6 units per year. Something interesting that you may notice on FPSOs is that they're becoming increasingly attractive, also considering price volatility on the market. Historically, break-even was around $70, whereas now it is way closer to $35. And this makes business more solid and stable, even in the short term when it comes to investment.
If we look into LNG, as you can see on the left-hand side, the investment 2021, 2030, 3140, and 41, 2050. And on the right-hand side, you can see the most important projects in LNG. You can see there's a peak in investment from here to 2030, and then after 2030, it drops. Therefore, this business has relevant potentialities, but on the short to middle term. And the geographies are quite differentiated. From North America to Middle East to Africa. Now, if we consider the downstream sector, therefore refineries, again, it's clearly easy to understand that the total volumes to 2040 is substantially stable. Nonetheless, there are significant changes in geographies. Let me go back to what Sissi was talking about earlier. Having seen what occurred in the geopolitical situation, there's been plenty of changes. The Middle East has become more important, and Asia as well, which shows a more relevant growth rate. Therefore, this impacts a global weight, which is more remarkable. So, APAC on the left-hand side is the strongest region, which have lost importance in comparison to what occurred in the past. Now I would like to focus on the growing markets, an outlook on growing markets. Hydrogen.
crescita, nuovo.
It is a new market, growing market, plenty of forecasts available. To 2030, we have 590 gigawatts of installed capacity, and this sector is something that we are looking closely at. Our forecast shows a more prudent value, around 120 gigawatt, which nonetheless is quite a remarkable amount on the market. Applications here? Well, we start from a baseline that is quite limited nowadays, especially showing mobility as more interested, then power generation, and then industrial sector. These applications are important because not all sectors are important for you in the valve sector. If we consider distribution from the geographical point of view, we can easily understand that on the whole, the most relevant investment, you can see it on the left-hand side, in Europe. There is a foreseen capacity by 2030 vis-à-vis projects that have already been launched. Europe is topping the list, then ranking second North America. And the main difference is the size of these plants. In North America, they are far larger if we consider them compared to Europe, which means that Europe is mainly focusing to projects that are more distributed on the territory. In North America, these projects are deployed in a larger size and therefore are foreseen for the industrial sector. And this is something which is an important piece of information for you. There are other geographies following in line, and therefore the Middle East is also quite relevant, and you can see it on the right-hand side. So Europe and the Americas represent the most important geography. Now, let me try and give you a concrete example, because the applications I showed you earlier, the industries I talked about, are not that relevant in terms of volumes for your specific sector. In the mid and long term, an interesting opportunity could be the EHB initiative, but there are more players interested in this. But in Europe, since we are a global entity, Europe is a net importer of hydrogen from other regions, has planned the project on the structure for hydrogen. So this is at the initial stage, of course, but there are highly ambitious targets that want to be achieved, and this is an important piece of information for you, for your sector. Now, moving on to another market, which is quite new, the carbon capture, CCUS. Well, here there is a lot of interest, but it is still developing. It's not as ahead as hydrogen, and projects still depend on local regulations and, of course, cost on CO2. Local costs. So there are many other components that make or may not make this sector interesting. The most relevant projects are in North America, as you know. They are the trailblazers here. And some Italian companies are already working in North America with these companies. However, this is still in an initial phase. We are collaborating with North America. The projects are announced. So after North America, we have Europe and APAC and South America, and lastly, Middle East. Now, if we look at demand, so potentially on the long term, no longer on the short and mid-term, if we look at the demand in which type of application this technology is requested, you can see from this slide that the hard-to-abate, so-called hard-to-abate sector of metallurgy and cement are the most important in terms of sectors, but the chart also shows how Asia and China specifically are important here. This is a demand perspective rather than planned projects, but highly indicates how in the long term North America and Europe are important, but will be very important even in Asia. Now, last but not least, nuclear energy. It has shown a sort of rebirth in these last few years. As you can see from investment on the left-hand side of the slide, the top investment is foreseen in the 2026-2030 period, with a relevant impact still up to 2050. So again, a mid to long-term investment. On the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, the geographies. Asia, again, is truly relevant, but even Europe and Middle East have a high interest in this sector. It is quite particular in terms of requisites, certification standards, so entry in this nuclear energy sector is quite difficult, let's say, not banal. Now here, let's look at the repercussions or consequences on the markets. So core markets. Here, the key takeaway is that in the short to mid-term, we see solid demand. However, in the mid to long term, this demand may potentially drop or decrease. And some charts showed it clearly. The geographies play a more and more important role. North America is really increasing its importance. Asia is growing. And of course, what are the implications for the players? Well, overcapacity. It will be maintained, and we'll need to understand how to manage it. Second aspect, traditional segments, business sectors, are more and more on an increasing price pressure. And the last aspect is that the geographies are more and more expanding. On the other side, there are not so many opportunities on the new growing markets. They have to be developed, understood, but will not offer relevant volumes. And some opportunities will be possible just in some sectors. So the message here is that short-term solid demand and growing demand, but in the long term, on the one hand, we have to understand how to manage the presence on core markets, and how to position ourselves in the new growing markets.
Da qui
And now,
quelle che a nostro avviso sono le direttrici
in our opinion, these are the key priorities for the future.
lo facciamo con particolare riferimento
And we have studied this with particular reference to the Italian situation. And the Italian supply chain is made up of small and medium-sized enterprises. This has to be considered, and this is why we put as number one size matters. Number two, localization. Therefore, the presence,
punto di vista
commercial presence and manufacturing presence, services, this becomes more and more important. Then specialization, I will focus more on that. Number four, expand into value-added situations. There are markets that will show a drop in the midterm, and so we will try and extract a greater value where you are present already. And then lastly, an enabler, which goes across segments. And this is the so-called aggregation. It's not always necessary, but for sure, this element can enable all of these points. M&A. So let's try and break down all of these points. This is a representation by cluster of performances of industries by sector in larger, mid, and small-sized. And we also added the Asian cluster. And you see the revenues, then the EBITDA margin for 2019-22. And last parameter, the CapEx ability with reference to revenues, the average CapEx to revenues. So
una correlazione chiara tra dimensione e
and
capacità.
so revenues shows that there is a correlation between size and ability to stay on the market. So they have all decreased except Asian players. There are exceptions, but this is an average, of course, and we are focusing on the size of the enterprises. The small size, of course, enterprises have shown a worser situation. For the average EBITDA margin, the difference shows a greater difference. So from 18% to 0 for small size enterprise, and Asian players do not have a high profitability, only 3%. Then the column on the right shows once again that a larger size shows a greater investment ability. So they have innovation, presence, portfolio that is higher if compared to a player who is smaller sized, that depends on scale, of course, but also on profitability, because if you have lower profitability, you have a lower ability in terms of investment.
Scusate, si è bloccato il telecomando.
Sorry, I had a problem with the remote control. The clicker wasn't working. Now, localization. I see we've seen two components here, two elements here. Your customers, number one, are demanding and insisting on this, not only in the Middle East, by the way, quite everywhere. They are demanding a local presence in terms of offices and works and plants. These are some of the examples for this year. Last year, the picture was different. So you've seen new offices and new plants. And we've shown the Middle East example because it's quite significant. But there are similar pictures also in other sectors, even in North America, for example. This is similar. Linking back on localization in terms of the commercial projects are being distributed in various geographies at global level. These are some of the most important projects that are in the market pipeline. As you can see, North and South America are truly remarkable. Asia is truly important. You can see it from the various dots on the map. Africa, relevant as well. So this picture shows that the global projects become more and more important and requested. Now, specialization. Here again, this is considered very important because specialization shows how performances can impact profitability and revenues. So we have given the onshore, offshore, refining and nuclear. You can see the average of the sector between 2019 and the gross margin, which is an average that we have observed on the different sectors. Of course, there are differences, but this positioning gives you an indication of how the sectors are different. And why do we focus on specialization? Because this is required from the business point of view. So I focus my commercial efforts, my portfolio, manufacturing on one sector rather than another. And then there is a second level of specialization, which focuses on the product itself.
So basically, what am I offering to the customer? Something that is generally not available on the market, something that my competitors are not doing in Asia or elsewhere on that same business. So there are differences here. Sisse was mentioning offshore earlier on versus onshore. You clearly see the difference here, the development of onshore versus offshore revenues-wise, and you also see the difference between the expected gross margin. So there are significant differences, and this is perhaps an important aspect that is relevant to the companies we work with, but even more on the small sized, because if you can't be generalist, then you have to understand where do you want to invest the few resources available. The next aspect we mentioned earlier, the added value. What does it mean here to talk about added value? Well, it means that whilst I was historically working on the sales of products and services, whereas now the development of big players or even medium-sized players who are very active on the market, well, the bottom line is that they keep enriching their offering with new components, the so-called bundling, valves plus actuators. Here, there's an example. But as you move upward, you might have integrated solutions. You might have some very specific integrated solutions, example, HIPPS, and therefore new services, perhaps some IoT enabled or digital centric. But these are enabled once you make this step. Clearly, this journey is a long journey, and it is also very difficult for big players. It is even more so if you're a small player. And this brings me to my very last point for my presentation, that is the aggregation topic. Aggregation, which of course is extremely relevant, it has become very relevant on the market in Italy as well. Italy has been very active on this segment in these past few years, and this means that many companies in Italy are now clearly preparing the ground for the transformations which we've seen a moment ago. So why we're talking about M&A? Well, because when it comes to geographical coverage, investment, size, and investment to enrich and broaden your offering, well, that is all very difficult if you're too small. Then what is it that you can do? Well, M&A is a solution, but it's not always easy to execute. And not necessarily a company will be attractive enough, if it were standalone. So they have to start building some collaborations. They have to develop an interesting ecosystems on the market so that they might become appealing from an M&A standpoint. M&A is still crucial. And why is that? Well, because if I go back to this point here, well, the size matters. Size is what allows actually the possibility to go through point 2, 3, and 4. And if you want to grow, M&A is almost necessary. So my piece of advice and the recommendation that we're happy to share is, well, you should consider, perhaps if not M&A directly, you should consider more collaborations, partnerships. That is very much the first step if you want to open up this new chapter that might actually take you to M&A at some point, and it is an extremely important step. And let me bring back the slide I showed you. So the segment is very much alive. The most relevant in 23 is being Balan, but it was stopped, as you know, for other reasons.
Ok,
Okay,
credo di aver chiuso.
I think I'm done. Thank you.
Prendo il microfono soltanto per,
Well,
per chiedere se...
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can we break for coffee? Do you want to address a first Q&A session? So just let me know. What would you like to do? Okay. We're still going to have a Q&A. Well, there is a question from YouTube. There's a question from YouTube. Okay. For Mr. Bonetti, the question is following. What are the most interesting geographies if you look at the medium-long run perspectives? Well, I think we touched based upon that a moment ago. If we consider the long run, no doubt, I would say North America, South America, Asia.
Saranno comunque fondamentali.
Those three will be the fundamental geographies in the long run. If we talk about short, medium, they are not, but they will become surely fundamental geographies in the long term, well, given what we've seen on the different segments of business.
Abbiamo qualcuno in sala con qualche altro...
Do we have a question out curiosity from anyone in the audience here? The question cannot be captured if it's not spoken into a microphone.
Tantino. Moltissime sono in Cina, al solito, credo. No. E in Asia in generale. Sì, no,
Torno un attimo.
Well,
No, è andato, non posso. Comunque era in Asia, diciamo, un buon 40%.
well, I would say is Asia, 40%, and there's still quite a relevant amount in Europe. Europe is still quite relevant.
22-23, se non sbaglio.
22, 23, I think it was Asia, and the rest is well distributed.
Sono lì, credo, sì. Sono molto vicini, anche l'India sta investendo molto.
India is investing greatly as well.
C'è la parte di service, naturalmente. Sì.
And there's also the service piece that you have to consider.
Andiamo a prenderci il caffè o qualcun altro? Sì, dai. Tanto ci sarà posto per le domande anche alla fine.
Okay, we're breaking for coffee now, and we'll leave it to a Q&A session at the end of the event. Thank you.
Eccoci qui, spero che siano rientrati tutti in sala dopo il...
Okay, I hope you have enjoyed your coffee break. Thank you for being with us. We carry on with the following presentations. Now, for a last-minute problem, we do have one speaker remotely connected, Costantino Ferrandino, Senior Consultant from Octagona SRL, Geographical Diversification, 3P Logistic, the entry ticket to the United States. He'll be talking Italian, though, although the title is in English. Thank you. Thank you.
Grazie, grazie a tutti.
Thank you so much. And apologies for not attending in person. I was hopeful that I could survive to COVID, but then COVID hit me. And so apologies also for my voice. I will try to be as bright as possible.
Andrei avanti con la presentazione se ci riesco. Ok.
Okay, let me...
Pregherei la regia di farmi vedere lo schermo, quello che si vede, così riesco a...
I'm struggling to see the screen. Okay, now this is fine. Thank you. So as Sissi said, we'll be talking through geographical diversification. So what's the strategy to enter the United States? What's the entry ticket? And how can we make use of logistics and not only? So let me just say rapidly introduce Group Monfiglioli Octagona. We do work with the medium-sized companies. Stakeholders are entrepreneurs or the first line of report. As you can see, in the United States, which is what I'm going to talk about, we've been there with three operational, let's say, venues. Okay, this is a kind of introduction, although this has been heavily and extensively presented by Sissi and Leonardo, so I would just say, I would perhaps just focus on some of the topics which are reconfirming what they said already. So, reduction of emission. This is an important trend, which is also very much existing for United States. All new projects that have been mentioned by the prior speakers, well, no doubt that they will undergo this new trend, so the emission reduction, which is becoming increasingly important. And so everything that Sissi Bellomo said earlier, well, actually, this is something that totally marries and embraces this slide that I prepared. The United States can really become a super interesting geography where we might have our next strategy. So this first slide, I'll try to be quite fast so that I can actually focus on the last part of my presentation. Okay, I'd love to spend a few words to say how important it is to diversify the strategy in a context which is so much swinging as the one we are currently observing. So the current oil and gas market, but not only, and because of the geopolitical scenario, now a diversification which is expanding, let's say, the horizon of our small and medium-sized companies is crucial. Next to M&A, which is another interesting strategy that Leonardo mentioned. And so such diversification can really help smooth out some negative aspects, such as the pressure on prices, and also the management of bottlenecks all along the supply chain, which is unfortunately back there. So why the USA? So why? Why? Because United States is the main provider, the main producer. And when it comes to oil and gas, as the other speakers have said, so not only they have grown, but they are very much sitting at the top of the pyramid, and so they are a key contributor, and they are back again in a strategic industry for U.S. And of course, the U.S. will never lose sight of such an important priority as this one is. So in the very short term, this will be even more the case. And that is because of a strategy of a short, medium term, and that is exactly what we do as Octagona. So in Octagona, we do work on these strategies. We don't deal with long run, only with small and medium term. And then I will outline the strategy in a moment. And that is a strategy that many SMEs could actually adopt as they might be interested into our perspective. Let me spend a few words here on two key topics when it comes to US market. First of all, specialized workforce. And we obviously talk about a geography where human resources are extremely dynamic, and now they're very skilled, and that goes without saying. But the market itself, the HR market, is very dynamic. So when you want to attack such a market, you have to bear in mind that your workforce has to be well-trained and highly skilled, and they are extremely dynamic. Another aspect that you have to bear in mind when approaching the United States, maybe not in the super short term, well, is the incentives and foreign investment that each city, county, and state in the United States are happy to discuss about on a one-to-one basis, not through generic tenders, but they very much appreciate negotiations, one-to-one negotiations, even with companies which are small-sized. I've been even faster on this slide. I just would like to remind you all that the US market is already a crucial market in the Italian economy. They're the first commercial partner of Italy outside Europe, right after France and Germany. And of course, Italy is as important. Still, the trade interchange, it's in our favor constantly. And as you can see in this slide here, machinery and equipment, which we stand for today here, well, they cover basically the sum of food and textile, which are flagship for Italy. So let's not forget that machinery and equipment, and therefore the valve industry, is making alone as much as textile and food are doing. And let me come to the core of my presentation here. So we always want to remind companies that before you try to invest into the United States, or let's say before you approach them, before you try to settle down in such an important market and you develop systematically, you must have a well-defined strategy. That strategy will allow you to outline a short-term, at least a medium-run objective.
la comprensione delle dinamiche.
It is also as important to understand the dynamics of the US market. Americans are not Europeans. Over the last few years, they've developed a business logic which is completely different from ours. You don't want to underestimate these cultural differences, as they might jeopardize your approach, your business approach from the very beginning. And you don't want to do those mistakes, you know, because these mistakes might be time wasting, and time wasting is even worse than wasting money. So you want to plan your efforts effectively and have a severe, very strict timeline of what you want to do, when you want to do it, and constantly following things up. That is very important.
Quella che noi andremo a delineare adesso praticamente.
So what I'm going to share with you now is an entry strategy into the US market based on 4 pillars. Now, in this case, I'm talking about companies which have already started to talk to United States. I would assume that companies we're talking about now, they must have had something to do with the US. So they must have, let's say, had some kind of experience, some flavor, and I'm sure they have understood already how important a strategy is. So what I'm trying to outline now, so what I will be outlining now, is a strategy which allows a soft landing, therefore being perceived as American, although we are not Americans. So what I'm saying is that the tools that I'm going to share will allow you to approach United States, work in the US, have an activity there, having a business there, without necessarily developing an American subsidiary, which is kind of notorious for everyone because it implies money, efforts, and admin, a lot of admin efforts as well. So let me go through them one by one. So pillar number 1 is very much the understanding of the market and the understanding of where our competitors are positioned, understanding where our customers are, and the size of the market. And I'm not just saying vaguely or broadly speaking or speaking loosely. You really must become familiar and fully knowledgeable about your potential competitors, because they're all very diversified and there's no one company which is the same as next. So
Andare a dimensionare quel mercato.
therefore, being, let's say, succeeding in understanding very well how is the market made of is already a good step. Then, of course, the pricing. Pricing is as crucial. And I have to say that it is usually underestimated. We believe that as long as we can sell to Gulf, we'll be able to sell in the United States. Well, that is not the case. I can tell you that there might be more favorable prices, but that is not so tried. So you have to be really systematic in analyzing and understanding all these parameters so that you can develop a winning strategy. In absence of that, then strategy can be successful, but it can also be a failure, because it might be that you can still be successful in the end, but let me tell you that it is less and less let's say, randomly happening. And then product registration. Engineer Apuzzo mentioned that there will be some new registrations ahead, and you always have to keep up to speed with it. Pillar number 2 of the strategy that I'm outlining is let's say, the logistic piece. What I'm saying here is that the strategy will not imply for you to establish a company or to set up a company in the United States. And that is something that many consultants, they usually recommend. I'm not saying that this is wrong or right, but I'm saying that this would perhaps discourage companies from approaching the US. And what we do recommend is not necessarily to set up your company on day one, but actually to start from the logistic as a key strength. And therefore, it means from 6 weeks of delivery when the products are traveling from Europe or for the eastern part of Europe, actually bring it down to 6 days. Because if you have a warehouse in Orlando, Florida, in the extreme southeast part of the United States, in a matter of few days, you're able to reach out to Portland, for instance, or Houston. So the strategy of the geography of the, let's say, the ideal location, it is also extremely important. So when it comes to the logistics, again, it has to be found in the closer, let's say, hub, so that it may reach out all the relevant destinations in a matter of few days. Of course, it is necessary that this logistics has to be fully integrated with the reporting that we have in Italy, and through a deposit account, we will have a great advantage of being operational in the US without being looked at by IRS, because that we're not yet being considered as a stable organization with all the relevant repercussions that you can imagine, as well as the repercussion on the Italian tax. And then from a logistics standpoint, let me show you here what are the 4 applications that you want to start from. So, because of course, as you move forward, the cost will increase. So, see if we're starting from a free trade zone, 3PL, so punctual management of the market through the free trade zone, and then 3PL. Once again, to ensure a soft landing, to approach and be there with the logistic organization. And then again, of course, for a break-even standpoint, once you are on a break-even, which allows you to rent your own logistic, then of course you will pay lower cost for logistics, but you will have to handle a much bigger load, much bigger efforts in terms of managing products. And then of course we come to step number 4. At that point, we have already set up the company, and at that point, I do have my stable organization in the US, and the one thing that I have to understand is how many services I'm already managing in that country. So this strategy, as I said, relies on 4 pillars. This is pillar number 3, so the ongoing business development. This strategy can be very helpful for small, medium-sized companies, which either they have very well, let's say, they are very well organized internally, and of course they're happy and they are ready of developing a good sales organization on site. The benefit here is that you can be perceived as a local partners, and
In questo caso parliamo di local,
if we talk about
immerso nelle dinamiche, come dicevo prima, culturali.
so through the local temporary manager, that can be it can be very helpful because it will perceive all the different shades, let's say, and all the important variables which are existing in that type of market, and they're able to have a dialogue with the company, and it will be far easier than what happens in Europe to attend conferences, exhibitions, events, as your meeting shows today. If you gather together, this can be really, really effective. And this is even more dynamic when it happens to United States. Although in Italy, we do have some very good examples.
Il concetto che fa parte del quarto
Pillar number 4 is the scalability concept. As I said earlier, this is a strategy that allows you to approach the United States with the soft landing. I'm not setting up a company, but I do have logistics available on site, which is making my level of service to the customer perceived as very good, very high quality. At the same time, I do have a sales activity ongoing, which makes it very possible for me to be there and to be contacted. So, for instance, you can have your own phone number starting with 01.
bisogna sapere già
But of course, you must have a scalability idea in your mind. So you have to consider the next steps. They have to be planned ahead, and this is something that we have already tested with a number of companies, and this is becoming kind of fruitful after a couple of years. So when I say scalability, it means that at some point you will have to decide to set up a company.
plan e dunque
This means that you have to have in mind a business plan, a cash flow that covers a 3-year period, and then, of course, you have to focus on recruitment because hiring in the US, especially today, also in the past, is truly, truly something that is a sensitive phase. If you go wrong here, you are going to lose plenty of time, too much time, and time is precious. As I've showed you in the previous chart with the third-party logistics system, once you start hiring, you will have to lease your own commercial space, your own leasing logistics space, and this is something that will become crucial in terms of your future success. Now, to recap my whole strategy, in order to approach an important market like the United States, but most of the North America falls into the same procedure or strategy, it is important to have a direct and constant market contact after soft landing. And let me repeat something that I've already anticipated. If you are present on the US territory, sometimes you are expected to establish a subsidiary, and fixed costs are quite high. With my strategy, well, you will just have variable costs and not the fixed costs. So these costs can be more controllable. If you elevate the level of service you can offer to your customers, well, this strategy for those who have already landed in the US and wants to implement their presence in a scalable manner, well, this is the best strategy to follow. In most of the counties we've worked with in the US to promote the funding ability and allow incorporations and the establishment of companies on the North American market, and Leonardo touched upon this, is something that is expected after a certain period of time. There will be a sort of push towards manufacturing on-site in the US. So after the soft landing, you should have already envisaged the true landing, so with skilled staff, with following an American way of doing business. And this will allow you to have an ongoing success for the strategy of your company in the US. I have concluded. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry for my low level of the voice, but that's what I have to cope with. Oh, come on, Mr. Ferrandino, you have been truly very lively in your presentation. Now, thank you very much. Now we are going to give the floor to Marco Tornaghi, Senior Product Manager for Valpress SRL, and he is going to focus on valves for hydrogen service, technical requirements, and regulatory state-of-the-art. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and it's now going to be quite difficult on my behalf to try and infuse enthusiasm at this hour of the day. When I presented my title to Virginia, she said, well, this is not a highly captivating title to present at 6:30, but this is my role, so I am always focusing on project developments for valves. But today I'm here as the representative of the European table for the coordination of our regulations in the oil and gas valves. In this field, our members are already working and delivering their products worldwide. But when we deal with oil and gas, of course, we need to focus on many, many different aspects. And so when focusing on hydrogen, you see, it is easy to imagine this green future thanks to a molecule of hydrogen and water. Everything is nice and silent, and everyone is happy. But once you have to approach the standard, and so I am the technician and working with the API 6Z, we are setting forth the standards for the valves that we had to write from scratch, and now it is an addendum to an existing regulation. Now, the second, as a convener, and a convener at the European level, we are 67 people, and each one, portrays and represents its own sector and world. I manufacture butterfly valves, ball valves for me. And so we had to work together and define hydrogen. So in the past, hydrogen was very easy to envisage. What is hydrogen service now? What should we do when writing down the hydrogen-ready standard? What are the concrete examples and rules? Once you play football, the coach says you have to play well, but if I have to play well on the football field, I need to know the rules and know what to do. And so I have to overcome the car in front of me on the motorway, but before overtaking, I have to look in the rear view mirror and see if there are any cars behind me. So, hydrogen service, what should we do? Let me give you an example. Man lands on the moon. The mix was 100% hydrogen. Do you know the pressure of hydrogen in a fuel cell, or what you should put in a car? 700 bar. Just to give you an idea, this is hydrogen service, top hydrogen service. And then, what else? Do you have a real-time application on where you use hydrogen, except for the petrochemical, where there is the typical rule of refinery? This one. You might know this one because you might recognize this. It was in an Ozpatec movie. My sister wanted to introduce me to movies, and I stole this frame from a film of Ozpatec. So, in 1920, 1930, you did not produce with a methane pipe. You manufactured with a system that was German, and it was made from coal. And there was this slight detail. It also had hydrogen. And I discovered this by chance because during an inspection in my company, we manufacture valves for gas distribution in cities. And so I was looking up this aspect, and this is why I became a convener. And so at the beginning, I was not feeling that well in my shoes. However, I was told 50 years before, my teachers told me that in city fuel mixes, hydrogen was present at 20-30%. Why should it be a problem now? Why do we need a standard for hydrogen? And I said, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So hydrogen was with us, and we had no problems with that. And this is an article written in 1991. I am a pretty curious person, and this article was written in 1999, where the US government in 1968 had already prepared a protocol in case of failure of the lunar mission. The moon landing had been authorized with a success probability of 50%. Come on, 50%. So the probability that it could go wrong was 50%. And in fact, they had a protocol, and they had to probably come up with a press release saying we were unsuccessful. So when I read that, I had the inverse idea come up to my mind. We've always used hydrogen, but we have changed. Why should we write a standard? To go to the moon and land on the moon, so to include hydrogen in our technology? Come on. We cannot have these percentages of failure. We want it to be super safe. And so let's move on to the next step. What is the hydrogen service, and what should I guarantee for the safety and security of this technology, for this service? And this is the title of the standard. The API standard says service at normal temperature. These are the Americans. What is normal temperature? So not high temperatures and not cryo temperatures. For Europe, it means for hydrogen application, so a generic title. So the standard. I have finished my introduction. I was probably a little bit boring up to now. So we have to define scopes and highlights. So in Europe, it has to be a performance standards. I don't demand anything. You can manufacture your valve and it has to pass the test, and we will write the rules of the test. Then the second one is a design. You shall make this valve for this application. This is the test. But it's not written anywhere that it should go one way or the other. It can be a mix. It can also be both, one, the other, or both. This is a starting point. Now the next step. Last year, the Italian government came up with a decree where it states that natural gas in our households, we can accept the hydrogen mix at 2% with no other added request. My interpretation was, well, 2% was an impurity, and now we consider the fact that it's up to 20%. And if we consider the consumption of gas in Italy and hydrogen in this 2%, it would be a gigantic figure. The common practice is to consider the energy requirements in the summertime when we use air conditioning. And so we have to generate electricity in a renewable way and in an abundant way. But now I wonder, what is the pressure of natural gas in the city pipes used by a family? 25 millibar. 25 millibar equals to the difference between a day of sunlight and a day with rainfall. The European standard or regulation defines the pressure directive and equipment directive when the overpressure is 500 millibar, 0.5 bar. So hydrogen in the city at 2% or 4% or 10%, is this hydrogen service, yes or no? Is there a risk, yes or no?
Le applicazioni di un
The
elettrolizzatore.
application of there are two ways to make hydrogen. Let's simplify. I have a methane molecule, and I eliminate carbon, and I have hydrogen. We don't like it, it's methane. So green hydrogen, I take water with an inverse battery. Instead of eliminating current, I add it. So from one part, hydrogen evaporates and the other oxygen. And Italy has a history in this because we manufactured oxygen for the healthcare industry. And so we already have the technology available. But after the user of hydrogen, you have to stock the hydrogen, 200 bar, then you have to transport it at 800 bar. So we have to set forth a standard that responds to 25 millibar, then 30 bar, 200 and 800 bar. So, you know, when going down in depth, in detail, things become more complicated. And hydrogen liquefies at minus 253 degrees. And it also is used at a high temperature, 800 degrees centigrade. And so we have a shift from 0.1 up to 100 So we've been working on this for a year, and we just agreed on how to understand risk. Partial pressure of hydrogen is already known because in some oil and gas standards, the 777 spec is defined as a product between the line pressure and the hydrogen percentage. And in city natural gas, if we had 1 bar and the hydrogen percentage is 1, the risk is 0.01. If we go at a compression plant where the line is 200, we have 100 and 200. The difference is 4 zeros here. So we have to be pretty careful when modulating these aspects to guarantee safety and security. So we have to assess risk. We define it by the second parameter. Then, after, let's go in depth in the details. I can have hydrogen production outdoors, and the risk there can be embrittlement. Yes, because hydrogen embrittles on the long run. And so the product we manufacture has to be solid, has to be tough. What if we manufacture indoor? I'm a lab, I test valves. So the service is indoor. In all of Europe, in all of the world, in kitchens, we have air inlets for gas, for example, because of leakages, and we want to avoid leakage. And hydrogen is 16 times smaller. So if we have indoor service, I will have to write something different here.
And what if is it below manhole in the street? And what if I have a chemical issue? Then I will have to avoid explosion. I will have to pay attention to that. There are also other aspects that you want to take into account: the quality of material, the embrittlement, and the greenhouse gas. And I didn't know there was a norm on the reduction of a fugitive emission. If hydrogen is a greenhouse gas, then we should also include hydrogen there. If a valve should close a line, well, let's bear in mind that hydrogen has a smaller molecule with respect to the molecule you use for testing. So what test would you use? And so on. So if you want to shift from the future we want to a practical world, well, there has to be a written standard with some answers, with some clear answers. Otherwise, the risk is that we may find ourselves with products where you can't understand, you can't tell the difference between apple and pears. So there has to be a clear marking which is stating the level according to which we will be executing all of that. This is my final slide. So technology is well known, but if we believe that we can apply standards of oil and gas to other industries, the risk is that technology will be very expensive, because if I do apply a number of requirements, and if I do have a small valve and I'm asking some 15,000 euro extra because I need to test including on hydrogen, it becomes something that the market cannot cope with. I have to find a balance between what is safe and what is necessary. And then we come into policy making, which is a completely different story. For policymakers also have to aim for that balance, and that is an exercise of European democracy. Thank you.
Grazie, tutt'altro che noioso, anzi io sono rimasta
Well, that was very interesting and kind of it kind of struck me what you said. So this, as small as we're doing, it is still standard free, right? So there's no standard yet. The comments cannot be captured unless are spoken into a microphone.
No, certo, su quello io sono tra gli scettici.
Yes, of course. I call myself a skeptical number one, and I don't believe it's going to be feasible in Italy in the short term. Okay, we leave the floor now to Alex Giorgini, R&D manager from Valen SPA, as well as managing director from IRTA. Strategies and tools for sustainability reporting in the manufacturing industry.
Buonasera e grazie.
Good evening, Sissi. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Sissi, for the kind introduction, and thank you for participating into this interesting event. So my talk will touch base a topic that has been, let's say, dealt with by prior speakers, and that is the sustainability topic. The objective for my speech is to provide a framework for strategies and tools with a very clear test around the challenge that as companies, irrespective of the size, we are now dealing with, and more specifically in the manufacturing industry. So the subtitle of my presentation, I've used something quite strong, which I would like to substantiate now with my explanation. I said it is an irrevocable imperative. So it sounds very sharp, but let me substantiate this terminology with some comments. Well, a short introduction of myself. So my background is in the field of energy engineering, and I have a specialization in enabling technologies for the energy transition. I'm in charge of R&D in Valend, and what I try to do, I try to diversify the business of the company, so beyond the valve, within hydrogen, additive manufacturing, and digitalization. And last but not least, I'm also co-founder and managing director in ERTA, which is a young consulting firm that offers analysis and research within sustainability. Few words around ERTA. ERTA is an innovative company which we have established to kind of put together competencies and experience within sustainability, and that is being developed within oil and gas and energy industries. It is a project which is the practical translation of years of knowledge and know-how. And the goal is to offer simple and versatile solutions to our customers in order to show the added value of products, services, or entire organization to the relevant stakeholders. So let me go back to my strong terminology, so an irrevocable imperative. Why is that? Well, there are three reasons why, and they have to do with three different areas. The first one is the macro one. So the whole of the mankind trying to save the world, save the planet, and so on. But of course, there are some worrisome repercussions. As per a recent study, it has been shown that 41 of the 42 necessary requirements to achieve the climate goal that we set for 2030 and 2050 are not aligned with the predetermined objectives, so we're not working well. A second aspect is a more tangible one, and it has to do with the legislative framework. If you take the date January 1, 2024, that is the date when the new obligations from CSRD will be in force. So the directive has been already approved. But starting from financial year 2024, they will become operational. And the last aspect, which is perhaps the closest to the business, to the company, it has to do with the competitiveness of the company, which is also very practical for the entrepreneur. And that is that more and more our customers are asking us to report about our behaviors, performances, practices under the umbrella of the ESG. And so this is something that we have to keep in mind, because if we want to preserve our business and we want it to still be there, we need to be able to report accordingly as per what we are asked. So back to the regulatory framework, which I briefly mentioned. Now, this is a context with a lot of acronyms. They're annoying, but unfortunately, I have to report them as they are. So the past has to do with the non-financial reporting directive that was adopted years ago, back in 2014. Whereas current time has to do with the corporate sustainability reporting directive, so which is going to be in force, entered into force on January 5, 2023. Now, what is hidden behind this? Well, I should say that many companies who are now undergoing these obligations, this number of companies is becoming more and more numerous, and the objectives as well as the reporting requirements have become more detailed, well articulated with respect to what it was in the past. So it is way more than the non-financial reporting directives.
Ok. Grazie mille. Grazie, sì. Ok, quindi siamo a cavallo di questa transizione.
So we're now in transition between the old directive, the past directive, the new directive, and the, let's say, the expansion of requirements for the reporting activity. Now, let me spend a few words around the new directive. The main goal of the new directive is to improve the so-called sustainability reporting, which is a process which means organically communicate a company's performance and tell clearly about the strengths and weaknesses when it comes to the ESG context. Well, broadly speaking, what they want to do through this directive is to equate the relevance of the ESG results to those which are usually reported in a traditional financial statements. And let's say that they would be embedded into the more traditional ones. So sustainability reporting will be part of the financial statement in the end, so deeply connected with it. To whom it is addressed? Well, not necessarily to big companies, and therefore we might believe that we're not subjected to it. So we also consider small companies, 200 average number of employees, 20 million balance sheet, net revenues 40 millions. Our small and medium companies which are listed, and so including subsidiaries, and this is obviously broadening up the addressees of this new directive. We're talking about 50,000 companies around in Italy. And what I would invite you to do is to consider what are the indirect repercussions of that. If 50,000 companies are about to do this activity and we broaden up the supply chain upstream and downstream, how big is this number? So how many companies will be actually involved and engaged in this process? So this is an important statement that you have to keep into account. Timeline, well, it is not happening tomorrow, but close to it. And for 2024, nothing special is happening. We just carry on with what is being set. 2025 is the big companies not listed. 2026 is the SMEs listed, where they can actually select an opt-out option and extend it until January 1, 2028. But it's not much anyway. The European Commission, on top of saying what is timeline, what are the goals, they do also provide some practical tools, and this is important. So we're talking about the ESRS, some standards, and the first set has been approved already, mid-23. There are 12 standards. 2 are general, and the other 10 are broken down by ESG topics. Some specific industry-related standards are ahead, are still to come, as well as some additional standards which will address some specific company, for instance, listed SME. But there will be indications also for the non-listed SMEs, which still means on a voluntary basis, they decide to stick to this project. So no one is excluded, basically, even if it's not mandatory. So the question which is now raised is has it all started with this new directive, or was it in place already? Well, it's been 25, 30 years that many subjects all around the world have been dealing with sustainability reporting. The most, let's say, the most relevant standard before Europe was regulating was GRI. GRI comes from Boston, and it was founded in 1997. So the GRI standard, the most updated one we have, has undergone a significant update in 2021 and is being enforced starting from this year, 2023. This very practice has been applied irrespective of applications and European requirements. So how does GRI standards work? Where we do have some universal, some industry specific. There's one which is specific for oil and gas. Some standards are so-called topic standards. You may report in a different manner, different according to the intensity, or you may run activities with reference to. So there's different ways of the reporting. And this, of course, allows a certain freedom. But that then, of course, this might also jeopardize the quality of the work in the end. So what is the approach of GRI standards to sustainability reporting? So the company will be in a roundtable. They will detect the stakeholders and they will engage them and bring them on board to understand what are the topics where the company might help about and the other way around. So it's called the materiality analysis. And once the material topics have been detected by the company for the sake of stakeholders, at that point, the company will identify KPI, will measure KPI, and will, let's say, develop a document which says the whole story about this, and we tell about the company in all of its, let's say, aspects. Well, almost drawing my conclusions, I'd love to draw your attention onto this document. So, new directive, new technical standards. The process was already in place thanks to GRI. Now, these two aspects will kind of come together, and it will be possible soon to interoperate these two standards. And this is great stuff, because you can imagine a company that has delivered reports through GRI, because GRI has been there for a decade. Now there's a new set of standards that is becoming mandatory, so they might be confused. So the promise is that there's going to be interoperability possibility. So therefore, one type of disclosure will be equal another one, so that there is a very straightforward process, especially for those companies who were used to do so.
Let me give you a practical example, a concrete example that has been applied to this Valent sustainability report. It refers to the 2022 financial year, and it was presented with reference to the GRI standard, and also in our oil and gas associations have come up with specific guidance. We have APIECA with API and IOGP for these specific processes in our industry. And if you wish, you may click on the link or copy that link and look it up. Now, a last overview in terms of additional services. We have the sustainability reporting for the ESG category. We may analyze carbon footprint, LCA products, processes, regulations that are specific to the ISO standards, or also the GHG emissions. So as an organization, we can really work on all of these aspects that are integrated in the sustainability reporting, because these are our very, very important components for the environment. And as Engineer Apuzzo anticipated, this is one of the projects that the association is working on, so a customized tool for the GHG emission assessment coming from Scope 3 supply chain for the valve value chain. And that was it. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm here if you have any questions.
Grazie mille, molto interessante.
Well, thank you very much. Very, very interesting. And the complexity level has increased more and more. Complexity is always there. If there are questions, observations, or remarks from the people in the audience or from the participants who are following online, do raise your hand. Virginia has her microphone. She's holding the microphone. Do you have questions? Yes, I do. One is from Mr. Tornaghi. In your opinion, which is the most probable sector where hydrogen will be applied and used largely? Ooh, what a question, $1 million question. So I do not have data, so you can only answer when data is available. So maybe in the distribution of natural gas in the cities, because Italy is #1 for distribution of natural gas, and also because it's the simplest place to start with. Let's start by eliminating a part of methane from the fuels. But also another possibility. In automotive, the first group of automotive, Toyota, does not have a project on electric cars. They only have fuel cells, whilst Tesla is focused on electric cars. So this shows which of the two directions have to be taken. It depends on costs and on sustainability. When technology has an accessible cost, that is where we should go to. And this is the next question, in fact. Is it better to have a hydrogen car or an electric car in terms of mobility and sustainability? Well, once again, first aspect. We are used, to move very easily. We can go to the gas station and cover 1,000 kilometers, and then the car is cool in the summer and warm in the winter time. In the electric car, you have a range that is set and that you have to drive wearing your coat in the winter time, and if you want to use the air conditioning on an electric car, you will have a range that is more limited. So we haven't found a mechanism yet that will allow us to have greater capacities in our batteries, but studies on superconductors are underway, graphene is being studied. So once these aspects are better developed, maybe even the electric car can be a feasible project, but it's not easy to give an answer on this field. Now there's another question for Alex Giorgini. How will reporting procedures, how will they change when the CSRD will be enforced? Well, that's difficult. Let me envisage that those who are used to have an internal structured team in-house in order to issue this reporting will not encounter difficulties. Maybe they will just, need to fulfill the mandatory and non-mandatory aspect of the regulation. Whilst for those companies who will need to be obliged or involved by their customers who are obliged to go in this direction, well, my advice is initially to ask for support, counseling, and consultancy to someone who is more expert. And so this is one aspect. And then to devote resources
multidisciplinare
for a multidisciplinary team working inside the company that will be tasked to manage the procedure and also have the mandate of setting up the culture, of creating the skills and competences in-house. And third advice,
anche se non obbligati in fin dei
even if we're not obliged, I mean, I believe that this will be a very nice exercise for the company to put forth. We still have a couple of years ahead before this becomes absolutely mandatory. And if we are able, to start working in this direction from now, we will be able to streamline everything before this becomes something that has to be achieved in a situation of emergency. So this is something that should be done, and my advice is for you to follow up on this aspect and to perform this exercise. So I don't know whether there are other questions. There's a question for you, Sissi. For me? Yes. Oh, wow. Good evening. I was wondering, this hydrogen development and the future landscape of hydrogen, how will the dynamics change in terms of energy sources? So it's not a technical question, but what is your opinion? Well, I did not really believe in hydrogen. I do not imagine hydrogen as the feasible future. I believe there will be space for hydrogen, of course, for green hydrogen more so. There are some who are already fit and in an ideal situation to cover this space. 10 million tons generated in Europe and the rest from the rest of the world. It's going to be difficult for us to meet these requirements. And it's going to be difficult until we don't have demand for this technology. Which applications do you believe will be possible for the future? I believe it's in the up-to-date, because that's where it's difficult to find alternative solutions. I don't know whether it's too much for me to claim that it's not feasible in the automotive, but I thought of, larger vehicles, ships. So, how can you load so much hydrogen on a ship? I mean, there are some projects that have been launched. So if consumption is preset, there are incentives that are arriving in North America, in Europe, in some supply chains, the Hydrogen Bank, for example, which, by the way, was opening the new tender in these days. So something is happening, but some projects have been cancelled. And I'm working on an article that will, an article contribution in these days. But there are some projects that have been funded by a pool of international banks. It will be super green, super efficient, and even the night sun heat in the desert with hydrogen at very low cost, but not for Europe. And they will sell that type of hydrogen to us. They also have a staker, a partner, an early kid. So we will import green hydrogen from the same companies we are presently importing oil. I'm too pessimistic, but that's my impression. So institutions do not believe in this. No, institutions love it. And even, the electorate, the public at large love this. They believe it's very simple, easy, cost-effective and banal. But from, when you shift from the plan to the project, then you see that there are gigantic problems that need to be solved and that they have super high cost. Would you love to ride an electric moped? And I say yes. Then you have to have a range that is very, very short. Then I would say, well, maybe not. So I have often been attacked by environmentalists. I'm not against a green transition, but I am a very practical person. I look at the real aspects, the real facts. I look at cost and opportunity and feasibility of things. And then I no longer own a car. And so I'm already very green. But I do not expect my opinions to be considered the opinions of an expert. Journalists just quote what they've read, they tried to understand and tried to disseminate. So now, if there are no other questions, we can continue our networking and chats with a glass of wine at the buffet outside. Thank you.